Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Meta Update. Today is November 17th, 2025, and it was a big weekend this last weekend. There were a lot of games being played, there were a lot of events, big and small. I know of multiple, like 200 person plus, like singles events, and then there were also just a ton of really big teams events. So there was just a lot of events, there were a lot of big events, there are a lot of small events, there's a lot of teams going on, and that means that we have a lot of lists to go over this week as compared to a lot of weeks we have gone over in the past. My name is Joshua Joshi Howard, and let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing to do, as always, this slide is always about singles. This does not encapsulate teams at all. There were a lot of teams events, like I said, but in singles overall, we still did not have a great weekend. We had 101 wins, 118 losses, and 5 draws for an overall win percent of 46.2. We had a pretty normal looking average ELO at 1539.5 and median ELO of 1523.4. Pretty normal things overall in terms of what you might expect from just like a normal looking player base. A couple other big thoughts from this weekend. Friends, don't let friends play Lehman Russ Tank Commanders. There's just a lot of them still being played. They're not good. We will have one list featured this weekend that has it. However, overall, even with that list showing up this weekend, it still has a 29% win rate for people who are taking in their list. There's obviously a lot of confounding factors there that the people who are not as good tend to be taking them, but it is a very bad sign when a datasheet has that low of a win rate. Like we said, lots of big events this weekend, lots of teams, lots of singles, and then we had a lot of known players actually having success this weekend. A lot of people that we have seen a little bit. They aren't necessarily the biggest names in the guard community, but they do show up reasonably regularly, and I don't think there were very few like known guard players that didn't have a decent finish this weekend that I can think of. One other big thing that was really interesting. This was one of the only weekends I think I've ever seen where we have had less than half of the community playing combined. I think we had 41 players and only 20 of them, so still like 49%, were playing combined. But it was very shocking that it was less than half. Normally, it is well over half. We're normally in like the 50, like 54%. Like I think it's 56% of players overall at GTs have been playing combined. So very surprising that it was not there. I think it shows a lot of people are just desperate to play something that is not combined. And then over and over, it keeps calling us back. With that said, though, let's go ahead and start getting into the list for this weekend. First one, Jacob Ott. At Me Showdown, really large event down in, I believe it was in Texas. It was definitely in the southern United States. Before I talk about Jacob's list, I also want to give a shout out to Robert Moreland, another player who has been experimenting with Mechanized. Robert ended up going 5-2 at the event, which is just below our cutoff of 75% win rate of over at least 5 games of singles in order to show up for the singles part of this. But shout out to Robert, playing a lot of Toroxes and Torox Primes, and doing rather well with it. But anyway, this one was Combined Arms being played by Jacob Ott, who went 6-1 at his event. It was not a whole lot of new stuff overall, but it was Gaunt's Ghost, 1 Cadian command squad, a Rogaldorn commander, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 1 unit of 3 Ogren, 2 units of 5 Rough Riders, 1 Chimera, and then a lot of tanks. It was a Hellhound, 2 Lehman Russ Vanquishers, 2 Rogaldorn Battle Tanks, and 2 Scout Sentinels. Now, one of the interesting things about this list is, if I copied it correctly, I don't really feel like going back and checking, but not having like a grand strategist on this or having a lot of tank orders does mean that a lot of these tanks are going to be hitting on, not a lot. This is a list that really has very little emphasis on orders. One of the big things that we're going to be looking at here that I'm sure Jacob had to do several times was the order switching. The Cadian Command Squad with a 24-inch order range with the order, giving an order to a unit of 5 Rough Riders, and then Gaunt's Ghost can drop down next to them in order to swap that order from move, where you move 15 inches, to +1 weapon skills, so now all of your lance weapons hit on 2s, which is a very powerful combination of just being able to move 15 inches and then charge something and hit them on 2s. A very, very good unit when you are able to do that. However, with so few tank orders and Lehman Russ Vanquishers and Rogaldorn Battle Tanks everywhere, it is a little bit surprising because when you are hitting on 4's base and suddenly your opponent pops smoke and you're hitting on 5's, it is very tough. The Scout Sentinels will alleviate some of that issue, but it is a very different take on a lot of the things that we have been seeing in terms of what has been doing well. So congratulations to Jacob on this 6-1. Jacob has been a player that has shown up. I don't think he's shown up since I started doing these videos. Maybe I'm lying about that, but he's fairly regularly shows up on our X and 1 brackets. Next, we have another player, Neil Burns Morales at DaBoyz GT in Rochester. Getting first place, our only event win this weekend, going 5-0. But this is this is also a really interesting list coming out from Neil. Neil, another player that shows up fairly regularly on our X and 1 winning guard list spreadsheet. Of course, a link to that will be available down in the description. But it is kind of a hybrid between the 2 Dorans and 12 Bulgren, and then the recent shift we started been seeing towards Cadian bricks instead of Krieg bricks that has been slowly taking place as people have been going for them. And also, there's just a lot of Dorns. So let's go ahead and talk about the actual list. Is Gaunt's Ghost 1 Cadian Command Squad with the Death Mask of Alanius. Probably just points filler. I don't think it doesn't seem like the kind of thing I would have been super intentional to bring. 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, 1 Engine Seer, 1 unit of 20 Cadians, 2 units of 10 Krieg, 1 Torox, 1 unit of 6 Bulgren, 1 unit of 3 Bulgren, Kazarkin, 1 unit of 5 Ratlings, 1 Lehman Russ Battle Tank, and 1 Rogaldorn Battle Tank. So, things I'm looking at here, obviously, we have a relatively expected number of squadron units to squadron orders. You have the transport, which likes orders but doesn't need them, and then you have 4 tanks and 4 orders. So a lot of the fairly normal stuff that you would expect. The interesting things coming out here are, 1, the Cadian Command Squad with neither Castellan nor Ursula Creed does mean that it doesn't do as much damage as some of the things we've been seeing from people like Gustavo or Nemo in terms of just taking those 20 bricks of Cadians. However, it is relatively difficult to shift still because you do have the Cadian Command Squad giving everybody in the unit cover as long as you're touching an objective. And then you have the 2 units of 10 Krieg, which kind of pop up every now and then to just be more annoying than your opponent expects to shift. The big thing about this is that you do have to be pretty on point with your positioning of Gaunt in particular in order to get the orders to your Krieg in the ways that you want them to, because a lot of the time you are going to be wanting to give Cadians an order from the Cadian Command Squad. So you can have Gaunt next to the Cadian Command Squad and have the Cadian Commander give the long-range orders, but it does ask some interesting questions about how Gaunt in particular is going to be positioned so you can get the orders on your next turn in ways that are relevant. The other big thing, like we were talking about, I'm not a huge fan of 3 Bulgarian units. At least that has been my opinion for a long time. Simply because I'm a very firm believer that every additional Bulgarian body is worth more than the last one that you brought. And so for me, it typically doesn't make a lot of sense to go 9 Bulgarian when you could have gone 12. Which, obviously has had a lot of success. We know that 2 Dorns and 12 Bulgren has had a lot of success for quite a while. It has been a pretty standard list for a lot of people, but Neil going with something a little bit different, dropping that second unit of 6 Bulgren down to 3, and also just taking a more violent list here. The 2 Dorn Commanders and the 1 Rogaldorn Battle Tank is just a lot of toughness 12 2-up saves, and then you have the Lehman Russ Battle Tank as well as some supplemental damage. So it is a pretty violent list overall. You do have a decent number of screens between the Bulgren, the Kazakh Ratlings, and then the Krieg in order to get in the way. And then you have a pretty secure home and a pretty secure natural between all the Cadians. So it does make sense. This is a pretty big stat check in terms of actually being able to remove things from the board. And the engines here are also really interesting here as a way to give an invul to the Torox after you send to try and send it out on turn 1 potentially, and then you can shift the engine seer over to whichever tank you want to have the 4-up invul for the rest of the game. It is very interesting to me that Neil opting to go with the engine seer here and the Death Mask instead of taking the Death Mask and the engine seer, instead bringing a Scout Sentinel, which to me Like the immediate thing is like that seems like it might be a little bit stronger, but either way, Neil's still going 5-0 with this list overall and winning DaBoyz GT in Rochester. So congratulations to Neil. Next, we have Edward Apple coming from the Waterloo Games Winter, getting third place overall, going 4-1. And this is there's got a couple interesting things that do pop up in this list. You still have the Gaunt's Ghost and the Double Rogaldorn Commanders. You still have the 10 Cadians, but they don't have any commanders at all. They don't have the Cadian Command Squad, nor Castellan, nor Ursula Creed. So they're just mostly hanging out on the home, and later on in the game, they can become a little bit more useful. The Torox is very normal with 1 unit or 2 units of Kazarkin, but the really interesting thing here is the Torox Prime or the Scion Command Squad with the Grand Strategist enhancement, and then 5 Scions that have to go in that Torox Prime. Oftentimes when you see these 5+5 Scions, especially in the US, where we typically are playing on Games Workshop, you usually don't see them in a Torox Prime, with the big point being that you have the option to put them in a Torox if you want. However, the full reroll hits that come out from the Torox Prime do allow you to punch up a lot harder, and then the Grand Strategist, of course, allows you to Ballistic Skill and First Ring Fire, Second Ring Fire when you hop out of the Torox. The +1 ballistic skill I don't think is as necessary, especially since you're planning to get the full rerolls from the Torox Prime. Because like 3s rerolling and 2s rerolling are not that different, especially when you have access to Sustained from the Scion Command Squad. But it is a tool that you do have access to in order to help order other things as well. You can give orders to Kazarkin, who like move, 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 and then you switch them over to First Ring Fire, Second Ring Fire. So there's still lots of ways for it to be very powerful. You still have the double Rogaldorn Tank Commander to just be powerful and do a lot of things. And then the other interesting units here, the 5 Rough Riders, 5 Ratlings are fairly normal. Like you see them pop up from time to time. You see them in a lot of good lists. And then 2 Hellhounds, a unit that a lot of people have been kind of slowly shifting away from. You see some people taking them as a budget exterminator for a while, but there's also an exterminator already in the list, so just a lot of tools to try and buff up the damage from the Rogaldorn Commanders. Between the Scout Sentinels, the Hellhounds, and the Luminous Exterminators do mean that they punch a lot harder, because you can get the Rogaldorn Commanders to just be +2 AP whenever they're shooting at something, and between that and the Scion Command Squad, you have both of them point at a thing with Fields of Fire, and suddenly the Scions and the Rogaldorn Commander are just going to absolutely obliterate something that doesn't have an invul. So a lot of cool stuff coming out from this list, coming out from Ed. Edward is another player that we see pop up fairly often, and congratulations to him getting third at Waterloo Games. Okay, this next one, I think Jonah is like doing a challenge against me. I don't know Jonah. At least I don't think I've ever talked to Jonah directly. But this is a list that includes a lot of things that a lot of guard players think is bad. There's not really a whole lot more to say about that, because it's a really unusual list. But Jonas Sinclair, another player who pretty regularly is going, 3-2, 4-1 every now and then will win a GT as well. And he's doing this in Hammer of the Emperor. So let's go ahead and get into the challenge list that it looks like he brought to Nemesis 40k Fall. He's got Cadian Command Squad, Gaunt's Ghost, a Leman Russ Commander, and Lord Solar. So obviously, Leman Russ Commander is not a unit that you see very often at all. It is simply considered too expensive for most people to ever really look at this unit. He has another unit of 10 Cadians, and then after that, it gets also really interesting. He's got the artillery team with the damage 3 gun, and then a unit of Cadian mortars. I've said in the past that I think if you're ever going to bring mortars, you should do it as the Catachan, because in matchups where they're not useful as mortars, like say you're playing into Imperial Knights or whatever, they become overpriced Catachan, because you're still getting movement 6, scout 6, and they're each OC2, and they're on big bases, so they actually take up like a fair amount of space when you are moving them around. But Jonas Sinclair instead choosing to take Cadian mortars, which have the slightly better Overwatch, but with mortars where you can't Overwatch indirectly anyway, it's a very interesting choice for sure. He's got a unit of 10 Ratlings. Sometimes you'll see this like taken in a transport like a Chimera or a Torox. You can run them over, you can hop the Ratlings out, shoot the Ratlings, and the Ratlings hop back into the transport. There's no transports in this list. And then after that, it's just a bunch of very efficient Russes. You have three Lehman Russ Exterminators, and Exterminators are more powerful in Hammer as compared to a lot of other Lehman Russes because their Strength 9 twin linked does mean that they're functionally like Strength 12, because anything higher, like anything up to Toughness 18, or Toughness 17, you're winning on 5s rerolling, which is slightly better than winning on, slight 5s rerolling is slightly better than 4s. So they are a much higher practical strength than what you actually see, in terms of just the strength 9. There's a Lehman Punisher in here, which I think is mostly here as a way to just like increase the volume that you have on this army, because while it has a lot of high quality shots going down range, it's not, if you are running into like chaff problems, the Punisher does help with that, especially because you're not running a Rogal Thorn commander for just the crazy number of stubber shots on top of all of the damage 3 shots that you have. There are 2 Lehman Vanquishers and 3 Scout Sentinels. So a couple of big things here. Of course, you have 3 Exterminators, a Punisher, and 2 Vanquishers. So that is 6 Lehman Russes. You have a Lehman Russ Tank Commander without an enhancement. So that is 7 Lehman Russes. You have 2 orders from the Lehman Russ Commander and 3 orders from Lord Solar. The other thing is you have the artillery team and the Cadian mortars who are also asking for orders from this list. And then you can do this with Gaunt's Ghosts if Gaunt's Ghost doesn't have anything else to do on the board. We have the Cadian Command Squad and then Lord Solar, and it's very stretched thin on a lot of the orders here is one of the big things that I'm looking at. You have 5 orders and 7 tanks that want them, and then you have a couple of things that also really want orders from Regiment, and not a ton. Like, you don't have a lot of extra leeway in terms of what you're actually going to be shooting. One of the things about this, though, is you don't necessarily need every tank activating every turn at full capacity. So, like, if the Punisher is not going to be shooting at an infantry unit necessarily, you don't need to always order the Punisher, just because, if it's going to be shooting at a Repulsor Executioner, it doesn't matter if it's hitting on 3s or 4s, it's going to be doing almost no damage anyway. So you can be a bit more judicious with which tanks you're actually going to be ordering. And then the really interesting thing, of course, is always the Lehman Russ Commander. So there's been some discourse on like Reddit and Discord that the ability on the Lehman Russ Commander is bad, and I'm going to push back on that. The Lehman Russ Commander ability is incredibly powerful. Anybody like it does not work if you're tied up in melee. So if you're playing up against World Eaters or something and they kill it in melee, you don't get a fight on death. And then if it dies to like mortal wounds or something, you also don't get to shoot on death. So it's not. There are ways to turn it off, but there are also just a lot of armies that don't, like, they can't deal with it, right? Like, it is almost always going to be shooting on death against like Tau, right? It's almost always going to be shooting on death against like Ultramarines Gladius. You're almost always going to be able to shoot on death against like Raven Guard. There are more armies where you are going to be consistently setting up the Lehman Russ Tank Commander to basically trade 2 for 1. Like, you poke it out, you shoot something, hopefully kill it, and then they shoot you back, it dies, and then if you didn't kill the first thing, you now get to shoot it again, or you get to shoot back at the thing that just shot you. So it is still a very powerful tank. Like, the roll is very good. It's just really expensive, which is why a lot of people aren't taking it. Anyway, this is a really surprising list coming out from Jonas Sinclair, another player who has been showing up pretty regularly in terms of actually having good results. But the artillery team, I think it's mostly just here to like get the last little bit of damage on something, right? Like, if your Lehman Russes or Exterminators aren't killing something, the artillery team is really good at doing like exactly 3 damage to things. As long as you roll like a decent number of shots, you're going to very consistently like hand someone like 2 AP1 saves for 3 damage, right? And even if they have like a 3-up, they're probably they are more likely to fail one of 2 3-ups than anything else. So, it's a really interesting unit. It's a really interesting list, and there's a lot of stuff in here that I'm a little bit surprised about that it did as well as it did. But I do want to say congratulations to Jonas Sinclair on making it 4-1. And I think this is the first time Jonah has showed up in the videos, but he's shown up in the spreadsheet quite a bit. Okay, that was our last singles list. We only had the one event win in Neil Burns Morales, and then Edward Apple getting third. And then the other ones, they did not make it to the podium, but of course they went X and 1. Okay, time to start talking about a bunch of teams lists. So we had a couple of really big events. The first one, South Pacific Gaming, a big event I believe was played on WTC terrain, because I know it was played in Australia, where I believe basically all of their teams' events are played on WTC terrain. We have Matt Hearn, a member of the community, and going 2 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw at South Pacific with even his list called it out, a very, very unique and original and innovative list, because it's 1 Cadian Command Squad, 2 Roldorn Commanders, 10 Cadians, 10 Catachan, 10 Catachan, 20 Krieg, 2 Chimeras, a Torox, 2 units of 6 Bulgrin, 3 units of Kazarkin, and a Scout Sentinel. This is, like, the perfect example of a 2 Dorans and 12 Bulgrin list. Right, 2 Dorans, 12 Bulgrin, 3 units of Kazarkin and boats, and then whatever other nonsense you kind of want to put in the list. One of the big things I do want to point out about this list is it is very important that you do have at least 1 regiment order if you're trying to play any bricks of 20 Krieg. I might sneeze here in a moment, and I apologize if that happens. But you need 1 regiment order minimum per Krieg brick that you're trying to actually play, and it needs to have range such that it is almost always going to be going towards those Krieg. Cadian Command Squad, you usually don't need to order the Cadians. And so you can just use that in order to +1 save the Krieg over and over and over again. Make sure that they are as durable as you can reasonably expect them to, and then from there, you're going to be free to do whatever else you want. Very normal stuff coming up from Matt. Going 2 wins, 2 losses, and a draw. One of the big losses was to big Berserker bricks. Like, I think it was 60 Berserkers and like 320s. One of the big things that I think a lot of people get surprised by is how good those 20 bricks are at mulching through Bulgrin, and then pile consolidating 6 off of that and just touching everything. And so I would not be surprised if that's what happened. It is very difficult to play against them the first time. If you haven't played against it before, it's also very difficult to play against on WTC, especially if they have board choice. So that is one of the big losses that I know Matt did have. But overall, going pretty even keel across the entire thing and showing up from the South Pacific. Next, we have 3 lists I want to show you guys from the Autumn International Teams Tournament held over in England, meaning that it was played on the UKTC. Now, I'm going to say right now, before I talk about Reese's list or any of the other lists, I am not an authority on UKTC. I've played on the terrain format once. It's not a format I touch basically at all. So a lot of the things that look a little bit surprising to me in some of these lists might be due to the fact that they're playing on a terrain format that I don't have a lot of experience with. Firstly, so Reese Darville coming through playing Combined Arms. Reese is a player who I have never seen play guard before, ever since I've been tracking who's been doing well. But he's a very high rated player at 1780, and from what I gather, looking at the list title, it sounds like he is mostly an Imperial Knights player. But for whatever reason, maybe he didn't want to do it, maybe his team didn't want to do it, not bringing Imperial Knights to Autumn ITT. Instead, he's running a pretty normal looking and slightly hybridized Combined Arms list. Cadian Command Squad, Gonskos, 2 Roldorn Commanders, Ursula Creed, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 3 units of 10 Catachan, 1 Chimera, 2 Toraxes, 2 units of 5 Rough Riders, 1 unit of 6 Bulgrin, 3 units of Kazarkin, and a Scout Sentinel. Now, I'm told that Catachan are better on UKTC than they are on GW, which is part of why you see them way more often over in the UK. Or rather, you see them do well way more often in the UK than you do in the US. I don't know why. I could not, I know this is something that a lot of UK players will talk about, that Catachan are really, really good. I know that on GW, the distances that Catachan oftentimes need to go typically means that they need to be in a transport in order to really get the best usage out of them. I believe that it's not as true on the UKTC as it is on GW boards. The other really interesting thing about this list is the 1 unit of 6 Bullgren. Like I had just mentioned, I'm generally a very big believer in every Bullgren body you take is worth more than the previous one. So 1 unit of 6 Bullgren is really interesting. It feels like a big tech piece because one of the big things about UKTC is they have a lot of like super ruins relatively close together in the middle of the board where you can kind of stage just in that ruin really safely. It's really hard to shoot into. It's a really tall L, so I believe that knights can just hide inside that ruin and not get shot. And so being able to block that out from your opponent so that their berserkers can't charge through wherever they want to go makes sense with this 1 unit of 6 Bulgrin to kind of make some of those melee matchups a little bit more palatable. Rees ended up going 4-0-1, getting a ton of points for his team. His team did pretty well overall. Not a ton of new thoughts on this. It's got basically all good stuff, no bad stuff. So it's just, as Goonhammer would oftentimes put different lists, combined arms, good stuff. And that's basically all this is. Okay, next we have Jerome Connolly, also at the Autumn ITT. Jerome has been going on a tear, showing up a record-breaking number of times in the spreadsheets that I've had over the past couple of months. So, congrats to Jerome on having such a strong last couple of months overall. Jerome also goes individually 4 wins, no losses, and 1 draw. But not getting quite as many battle points as we just had from Rees. It's a Kidding Command Squad, 1 Catachan Command Squad, Gaunt's Ghost, and Ogren Bodyguard, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, 1 unit 10 Cadians, 3 units of 10 Catachan, the exact same battle line loadout that we saw from Rees, 2 Chimeras, 2 units of 5 Death Riders instead of the Rough Riders, 3 units of Kazarkin, and then 2 Lehman Russ Vanquishers. So the interesting things here, of course, the Catachan Command Squad and the Ogren Bodyguard, something that we've been seeing Gustavo de Sousa play a fair amount. And they're just annoying to remove. But you still have the 2 Chimeras. I am always surprised when I see more Kazarkin than transports that can fit the Kazarkin. And this is a great example of a surprising number of Kazarkin relative to transports. However, you still have a lot of tools. You still have a lot of violence, a little bit more shooting violence in Jerome's list than the one we just looked at from Rees, but it's still a lot of combined arms good stuff. You still have a lot of the same tools. It's actually very similar. Like, if you just kind of look across, same battle line loadout, same number of Kazarkin, same number of horses, just a different combination of horses. And then Vanquishers here for Jerome, as opposed to the Scout Sentinel, Ursula Creed, and an extra Torox coming in from Rees. So very similar overall. Clearly having a lot of success. Very similar list. Not super surprising that they had similar success. Okay. Next one, we have David Irving, a player that does show up from time to time. And I'm not going to lie, I don't like this list very much. It is... So a couple of things. One, Hammer the Emperor tends to do better in Games Workshop or WTC layouts. There are lots of places on UKTC where Dorns don't necessarily fit super well, but you have enough places for the Dorns to move regardless. Whereas they don't, I'm led to understand that they don't really get access to new firing lines in UKTC with the crash through walls stratagem, and you just lose out on a ton of damage. That said, this list ended up going 2 wins and 3 losses, and the 3 losses were bad losses. But it was a Cadian Command Squad, Gaunt's Ghost, Lord Solar, 3 Rogaldorn Commanders, 2 Engine Seers, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 2 units of 10 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Catachan, 1 Torox, 1 unit of Kazarkin, 2 units of 5 Ratlings, and 1 Rogaldorn Battle Tank. And so the big idea here I'm expecting is that you have 4 Rogaldorns, and you can crash one of them through a wall, give it bonus AP, and just blow something up multiple times. However, it feels like there's a lot of points being spent here on things that are not really helping the game plan. like the Lord Solar here for like 130 points doesn't give you a ton of utility. You could hypothetically redeploy a Dorn. You can deploy it relatively aggressively, and then if your opponent respects it or like threatens to kill it, you can then redeploy to be more aggressive. However, it's still a lot of points that is not really contributing to combat in this army. The one Torox with Kazarkin is also a very unusual number to bring because you can only send that missile out once, and Kazarkin and Hammer of the Emperor are just way less consistent than they are in Combined Arms or Mechanized Assault, simply because they don't have access to the lethals or the +1 to wound. You can give the Torox like the once per game 4-up invul from the Engine Seer, but definitely feels like an army that is trying to be really durable and durability stat check people with Rogel Dorns, send them at people in really annoying ways, but it doesn't really have the tools necessary to deal with like a lot of melee matchups where they can get really close to you and tag a lot of things all at the same time, and you can only fall back and shoot one of them. So it is a really interesting list to show up here from David. It didn't do particularly well, but I wanted to show it to you guys anyway because it does hit our criteria of 1600 plus player trying to play something at teams. Didn't do super well playing on the UKTC. Hammer the Emperor. We very rarely see Hammer the Emperor do well on UKTC, and unfortunately this did not do super well this time. Okay, next we have a couple of lists from the event I went to over this last weekend. Throwdown at the Campground up near Seattle, Washington. First one, Caleb Smith. Caleb Smith won Laughing Dragon, another GT that I went to a couple of weeks ago, playing, as far as I'm aware, I believe this is the exact same list. It was Gaunt's Ghost, Ursula Creed, a Cadian command squad, one Rogel Dorn commander with Grand Strategist, one unit of 10 Cadians, one unit of 10 Catachan, one unit of 20 Krieg, 2 Chimeras and a Torox. I got that wrong last time, the last time I featured him, where I said he had 3 Chimeras. There was actually 2 Chimeras and a Torox. 3 units of Kazarkin, 1 unit of 5 Ratlings, 1 Hellhound, 2 Luminous Battle Tanks, and a Scout Sentinel. This is kind of like I was talking about with Matt Hearn's list, where it was just like, wow, this is 2 Dorns and 12 Volgren. This is, wow, this is a standard tank package from several months ago, but we downgraded the Exterminator to a Hellhound because we lost 50 points since then. And then you have the 20 Krieg, which a lot of armies just really struggle to deal with. And then you have the 3 Kazarkin, all in transports. You can really brawl for the midboard really, really well. And you still have plenty of damage to back it up between the Rogel Dorn Commander and the and the 2 Luminous Battle Tanks, as opposed to 1 Rogel Dorn that we would oftentimes see in other similar lists. So Caleb Smith going 4-0. I believe he played 2 Guard Mirrors this last weekend. Both of them, I think both of them went, I think one of them was into Combined. The other one might have been into Hammer. Maybe they were both into Hammer. But either way, just going through, this very much looks like a list that is intended to be a defender, but can very easily flex between defending and attacking, just because it doesn't really have bad matchups into anything, and then you can just play games and try and be better than your opponent. Okay, next we have Alex Najdek playing Recon Element at the exact same event. I've played against Alex before. He showed up in an event that I played up in Portland several months ago at this point, actually. And this is very similar to the list that Wesley St. Hines, aka Nemo the Fish, has been playing at basically all the big GTs, and from what I understand, Alex has been receiving coaching from Nemo at the same time. The only change that this has from the list that Nemo has been playing basically everywhere is that it has a unit of Kazarkin instead of a 3rd Castlin and a 4th brick of 20 Cadians. So it's Gunskos, Ursa Creed, 2 Cadian Castlins, 3 Cadian Command Squads, 3 bricks of 20 Cadians, 1 10-man Cadian, 2 10-man Catachan, 4 10-man Krieg, 2 20-man Krieg, 2 units of 10 Rough Riders, 1 unit of Kazarkin, and a Scout Sentinel. If you want to know more about this list in general, I mean, there are so many videos I've done with Wesley St. Hines. There's so much content with him. He did an interview with Art of War not that long ago. This is that. It's that again. Not super surprising. He ended up going 2 wins, 1 loss, and a draw. I believe the loss came because he was playing up against Warp Talons, and the Warp Talons just hit like every 9 inch charge because he was saving up like the CP in order to reactive move flat 6, and then also -2 to charge. And if your opponent just hits the 9 discharges anyway, well, that happens sometimes. There's not a ton you can do about it. So yeah, Alex going 2-1-1. I believe Caleb's team got third, and Alex's team got second, I think. Anyway, the last list from the same event is my list. I end up going 1 win, 1 loss, and 2 draws. I will have more discussion on this list, my thoughts about it, and the event in a video coming out either tomorrow or the day after, like Wednesday at the latest. It is Mechanized Assault, and it's Gaunt's Ghost, 2 Scion Command Squads, 2 Rogalthorn Commanders, Ursula Creed, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 1 Chimera, 2 Tauroxes, 1 Taurox Prime, 3 units of Kazarkin, 2 units of 5. I included too many. There's only 2 units of 5 Scions here, not 3 of them. 2 units of 3 Ogren, and then 2 Scout Sentinels. So it's just a lot of stuff. And the big thing about this is the Kazarkin and the Scions do tend to, like, they do punch up and they will kill more than your opponent oftentimes expects, especially if your opponent is on an objective and you can hit the 1 CP full hit and wound rerolls with +1 to wound because you hopped out of a transport. So it is a lot of extra damage coming out from these units. The problem that I've been finding a lot with Mechanized Assault is that you have to trade down a lot. You don't really have, like you really need Kazarkin and Scions, or you really want them to like trade up, which is typically the paradigm that you have in Combined Arms. However, in Mechanized Assault, good players won't let you do that. They'll be like, nope, you're actually going to have to spend this unit of Kazarkin to go kill 5 scouts, because I'm not going to put anything else on the objective until you have threatened to deal with my skirmishing pieces. And Mechanized Assault needs to be able to do more than that more often than you would expect. I end up having a very, very drawish weekend overall. I won 1 game, like a very small win, partly because we only played 4 rounds. I got 2 draws. One of them was an expected draw. One of them I was expecting to do worse. And then the last one, my opponent hit a 10-inch charge in order to secure his team the draw. Overall, this is a list that I ended up stealing from John Winter Russell, who's also been trying to experiment with Mechanized Assault a little bit more. Yeah, I'll have more thoughts on this list and the actual games that I played either tomorrow or the day after, so keep an eye out for that video. For now, though, this is everything that we had this last weekend. It is a lot more lists this weekend than we have had for several weekends past. If there are more events coming up relatively soon, I mean, there will be more events coming up relatively soon. I would expect, I think, in general, one of the big things, I'm going to go back to this slide, guard is, like, we are barely holding on to being, like, a high B tier army, low A tier, like, high B, low A, and we are rapidly approaching parts of the game where we are not able to deal. Like, we just can't deal with stuff in the same way. So with that in mind, I do firmly believe that things are, like, they have to get better in the January data slate, because they can't really get worse. Without just, like, you know, taking us out back, right? We are definitely in a tougher position. We are still seeing a lot of known people do well. We are still seeing there is a lot to play for guard in teams in particular. But it definitely does feel like we are starting to run up into the, wow, we do have razor thin margins against a lot of armies in order to actually have the same kind of success that we have had for so much of the rest of the edition. Anyway, I hope this has been useful. I hope you have enjoyed listening to this, and I'll see you guys all next week. Bye-bye.